Greetings once again to the students here in the Old Testament interpretation class here at Southeastern University. This is Dr. Larry Asplund, your instructor, coming to you, can you believe it, at the midpoint of our class. So I wanted to be able to stop by this evening and welcome you to week 5 and give you a sense of where we are in our 8-week intensive and what we want to look forward to accomplishing in week 5. By the way, last week in the week 4 video announcement, I jumped ahead to the research assignments in week 7. So if you still have a question about those, review that video announcement and then let me know. I'd be happy to interact with you in any way that might be helpful. The week 5 theme is prophets and prophetic literature. So we're moving through the Old Testament with our great objective of learning to interpret what is there. In terms of the week 5 aim of the learning objectives, first of all, there's a great introduction provided for us by Dr. Musey that you will want to read, and then a very specific list once again of learning objectives for each of the 4 chapters in Walton and Hill Unit 4, which is what we will be reading this coming week. Week 5, learn in terms of the resources available to us. First of all, we will read that Unit 4 in Walton and Hill, and also Dr. Musey has provided us with a specific list of key terms and key verses. So you're going to want to specifically take a look at those this week. And then a couple of really great videos in terms of our learning resources. There's one video from Sandra Richter called What is a Prophet? And then there was another very important one from Ben Witherington called How Does Biblical Prophecy Work? So be sure to take a look at those. They're short videos, but very, very good for us this week. And then there are a couple of supplemental resources from the Bible Project, one called Justice and the other called The Day of the Lord. Our week 5 apply in terms of graded assignments. First of all, we will once again have 2 discussion forums this week. The first one will be called Prophets and Prophetic Literature. And our discussion question is this: what is the difference between a prophet being a mouthpiece and a prophet being a spokesperson? What parts of their revelation did the prophets understand? What parts might they not have understood? Were they like in a trance? Or how did it work for them? You know, Peter in his epistle says they were carried along by the Holy Spirit, giving us a picture of someone in a river just riding the currents. How did that work? Of course, it's hard to really say for sure what their experience was, but I think it affects our interpretation. So were they really aware of the message? Were they curious about the message? Were they interacting with the message, etc.? And then the second discussion is called The Prophet's Warnings. What are some of the warnings the prophets would have had for our generation and culture? If you'll forgive me for saying, I find some people find prophecies of judgment and the end of the world particularly satisfying. It seems like they just enjoy, coming down hard on people and letting them know that they're going to die and go to hell, etc. And while that's maybe not my temperament, so I have to be careful when it comes to, oversimplifying other people. For me, when Jeremiah is a classic example of a prophet who was called by God to announce final judgment on his generation. And he could not do so without weeping. So, if we are in that kind of a situation, which, I don't believe we are, but if we were and God raised up a prophet to announce judgment, I would want to see him or her weep in announcing that judgment, because it reflects God's own heart. God does not enjoy, he takes pleasure, as the Old Testament prophet said, in the death of no one. He would rather that everyone turn and live. So it's still relevant, I think, in terms of the context of those Old Testament prophets and their message as a whole, not only messages of judgment, but also of restoration, to imagine what they might have to say to us. So 2 very, very good discussions this week. I'm looking forward to jumping in from time to time and interacting with you as we go forward. Then, of course, there are 2 short quizzes, as usual, objective quizzes. 4.1 is on chapters 1 and 2 in Walton and Hill and the learning resources. And then a second short, rather than having 1 long quiz, to have 2 short ones. The second one, 4.2, is on chapters 3 and 4 in Walton and Hill and the learning resources. So, as always, be sure to feel like you are in touch with that content. And then the questions are fairly simple and straightforward. I'm sure you will do very, very well. The prophets were those, as you will see in our resources this week, who had the assignment often of speaking truth to power. And they were representing God. They were representing God's perspective, God's will, and God's values. And particularly when they were, if you had a king who was just not keeping the covenant or was encouraging behavior in the nation that was not pleasing to the Lord, it was up to the prophets to speak for God. And the false prophets were those who spoke with, I guess one would say, political motivations to garner favor with those in power. So it's interesting to see how that worked and, how it still could potentially work in a New Testament context with the coming of Christ in view. So it's going to be another great week, an important week. I know you are enjoying just exploring the Bible in the Old Testament and taking time to give fresh consideration to all that it has to teach us. Once again, we're here for you in prayer every day, trusting the Lord not only to give us grace and protection, also to lead us to represent Him well among our neighbors, and ultimately to send His word and to declare that this pestilence must stop. So, I don't believe that God caused it, but God is with us in the midst of it and can certainly stop it whenever He wants to. So our trust and our confidence is in the Lord, keeping our eyes on Jesus, who is the author and the perfecter of our faith. So you'll be in my prayers every day this week. Please know that I am here to serve you in any way that I can. It's got to be a great week. God bless everybody. Just have a great week 5.